You brought up a really interesting point there when you're talking about lectins and soaking the beans. It gets me thinking about oxalates. Given what we know about these foods that contain them, are there different preparation methods such as soaking, cooking, fermenting, things we can do to still eat some of these foods, or at least in moderation, but knock that oxalate content down in the food before we eat it?
And there's not enough research on this, but the general answer is no. The reason why oxalates are like the worst of the plant chemicals is there's not a good way to get away from them other than separating them out from the food. So if you turn turmeric, whole root turmeric into curcumin extract, you've removed all the oxalate. Okay. You turn a potato into potato starch, you've removed all the oxalate. You turn peanuts into peanut oil, you've removed all the oxalate in the oil because it's a water-soluble charged molecule that goes with the polar water and is repelled by the non-polar fats. So you don't see it in fats. So there's ways to separate it out. You take whole grains and you turn them into white flour, and that's way lower in oxalate. So you get rid of the bran and you remove the parts that have the oxalate. The one thing you can do with the soluble oxalate in broccoli and a couple of vegetables is boil them pretty well and throw out the water. And that'll leach out maybe half of the oxalates, a third, depends on how much boiling. We're not going to come by with a science lab and test your broccoli pre and post, but boiling broccoli helps to revive broccoli as something you can play around with in kind of massive doses-ish. It's a little bit higher than like cabbage is very low in oxalate, but picking foods that are naturally low in oxalate is the easiest thing to do, most sensible thing to do. But you can use things like curcumin to season your curry and not give up on the curry flavor. So you don't give up on anything, but it asks you to cook at home.
What about certain supplements or foods that we combine when we're having some oxalates in other foods to help dampen the effect? Is there anything in that realm?
Well, calcium is the main binder of oxalate. We take calcium supplements to help the body remove oxalate. You can eat dairy foods with your diet, which is a good idea. And that will reduce oxalate absorption 20 to 30, 40, sometimes more percent. And there's such a mix of factors in a person's individual biology and that particular meal and diet generally. It's hard to say, but it's not a total slam dunk. You're still, as I mentioned in the book, they're seeing renal damage in children on almond milk. And that has fortified with calcium. And that calcium did not protect the children from getting oxalate damage from drinking almond milk.
When you talk about almonds, it gets me thinking about the fact that they're so pervasive in today's quote unquote healthy eating world. I mean, having almonds as a snack, we talked about almond milk and there's almond flour. So it's just, the stuff can hit you from so many different angles.
I think it starts to hit people when they decide to go gluten-free, and often they go dairy-free at the same time. So they take away the protective calcium when they remove dairy. So now they're in much more danger of high absorption rates. They've already got a gut problem, so they're hyperabsorbers anyway. So if you have a gut problem and no dairy, you're going to just like open the floodgates and have a lot more oxalate get into your body. And then because you're gluten-free, you're now going for almond flour, quinoa, buckwheat, teff. These are really high oxalate foods. So you've gone from the fire into hell. Like, this is not a good thing. So that's where people, I think, really, they start going, oh, I got to do something about my gut or my health. And they start going for this. And that's kind of how I just figured out oxalates were causing my arthritis, is I was trying to fix the gut problems that I thought were causing the sleep problems. So I was eating kiwi that's supposed to help with your constipation. So the solution became the problem that revealed to me the connection between oxalates and my arthritis, because by adding 2 kiwi a day for a few months, my arthritis came back with a vengeance, and I got all stiff and tight and was aging really fast on 2 kiwis a day. And that, in the suffering, I took a moment and paused and thought, oh my God, it's the oxalate in the kiwi.
That was 4 years later in 2013, right?
Exactly, yes.
So what we're all learning as you explain here is that pretty much it seems like all plant foods have some level of oxalates. And why I'm coming to this is because again, coming to that 150, 200 milligram number, you talked about broccoli, kiwi, you talked about, teff and buckwheat, and it goes on and on. So how much are in some of these other foods? Again, we can come back to the top foods you named earlier on, but do we need to, in a practical sense, keep track of all these secondary ones too? Like, I'm just wondering how quickly some of these secondaries can add up and get us to that 150 or 200 milligrams.
They definitely can add up. That's really true. And it's been surprising to me. There's both the phenomenon of people get rid of the top 3 offenders and they feel really great for it, because I think that's the place to start. And as your body starts, that really improves the body's ability to cope and heal. But the deeper you heal your kidney function and so on, the better the body gets at removing oxalate. That can cause additional sickness. But I have had some people who really didn't get the full benefit of paying attention to oxalate until they cut out the spicy foods. They had to cut out the Ethiopian and the Mexican and stuff. There's just enough oxalate in irritation and other metabolic effects. It's hard to isolate just oxalate with something like spices because they're affecting your nervous system, and you literally can turn on endorphins eating hot pepper. So there's lots of different metabolic effects, but she gave up the endorphin-inducing hot food that she was so committed to for years. And she was one of these people who would special order pepper potato chips, the black pepper ones that you couldn't get in the stores in the day. And she was really into spices. And it was when she gave up her spice habit that really gave her the pain breakthrough that she needed. So you have to play around. If you're not getting the results you want, you have to keep learning. And that's the whole method, really, is just, okay, hit a few worst offenders for a while, play around with that and how it changes your life, get used to that just so your life keeps working normally, and keep coming back and learning what other foods have oxalate, where are the medium oxalate foods. You just have to come back over and over and over it to you're deep in your awareness. If you attempt to learn it all at once, it'll just be, I think, a big muddle in your head and big disruption in your life.
You mentioned top 3 oxalate foods. I want to make sure we're highlighting what those are. I'm guessing spinach is one. We've mentioned rhubarb being up there. What are the top 3?
Well, the top 3 are the ones that you eat. If you never touch almonds or rhubarb, that doesn't mean you don't have a problem with some other food that's high in oxalate. Some people get into like beets and they're doing kvass and pickled beets and beet soup and beet this. Like, you can get into any particular food. It can just be one food in your diet that is your worst offender. For some people, it's chocolate. It's different for each person. Some people get, really hooked on potatoes, and it's their potato habit that's doing it. So it doesn't matter, like, mathematically what's the worst offenders. What matters is which of the high oxalate foods have you relied on as a staple and a friend? Which ones are you trusting? And is there any amongst that little crew of trusted foods that you're willing to, like, I could live without you, darling, and have a little breakup?
Well, that's a good point. It depends on what you're consuming, but to make sure people aren't consuming when it comes to the specific numbers, the top 3, what are the top 3 with numbers that just blow the rest out of the water?
Are those 3 greens, the chard, the beets, and the spinach. But you could call chard and beets exactly the same vegetable because they are. Botanically, chard is a beet with no beet on the end of it. So they're both worse than spinach. So that would be, to me, saying you don't have to eat chard and spinach should be like, holiday. Woohoo! Let's not mess with that. That's a way to simplify.
If you enjoyed that clip, press here for the full episode. I'll see you over there.
People are literally buying these massive clamshell boxes of spinach and using half pound or more of spinach every day. That is really toxic. I was looking back at this thing that I really love. I wanted to share this with you.